tense world right now, with Russia seemingly on the verge of invading Ukraine, protesters in Ottawa slowly being removed by police. It feels like conflict is front and center in our news feeds. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Turn the other cheek. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. This is the lesson that we have this morning from Luke. It is always difficult when we look at conflict, particularly conflict at a distance. We apply our own instincts or inclination to avoid conflict in our own sphere of influence. But this is a teaching of morality that concerns personal behavior. It is clear, it is constructive, and it is challenging. Perhaps you were taught this as a child. Perhaps you taught this to your family. These are strong lessons that we hold onto in life, but it's hard to do the right thing in the moment. And we can all think of those times that our patience is tested, where we may have wanted to say or do something we know is not helpful to the person who has wronged us. And we hurt others and leave things undone. We do not always love our neighbours as ourselves. We all fall short. The lectionary pairs this teaching from the passage in Genesis as Joseph's speech to his brothers, to show an example of where someone who had just cause or felt to feel betrayed and act out of revenge or spite shows us what this is like to love. If we, in our lives, take inspiration from these acts of humility, seeing God work through challenges and struggles, we can experience joy, peace, and contentment in our life. But we also recognize the differences that we see in our world. If we have led a peaceful life, if we have led relatively humble lives, if we have aimed to live our lives putting forgiveness first at the forefront of our intentions, even if we've been able to reconcile others in ourselves, the hurts that we've been through from those who've wronged us, we can still fall into the trap of misinterpreting this teaching in the way that we view others, in the way that we view conflict, in the way that we put expectations on others. We may wish for them to see the world the way we do. With this in mind, it is important, like with all scriptures, to read it for what it is and not for what it is not. For example, in this passage, Jesus does not say, promote forgiveness over justice. He does not say, project an expectation of forgiveness on others. And Jesus does not say, continue to accept abuse, or your safety isn't as important as forgiving. When we use the lens of truth and reconciliation, we know that forgiveness and reconciliation is not an easy task. Jesus does not say that the wrongs that happen are unnoticed or okay. This is important to remember when we look at things like the events last week of the statue being torn down in Gastown, or indeed at protests in Ottawa. We need to take note of those who misuse the term freedom, or who claim persecution when they simply feel that their voices are not listened to. And listen a little closer to making true steps to reconciliation and past wrongs. When we look at reconciliation work and our relationships with each other, we need to allow healing and forgiveness to take place in the light of justice. This is the task that we face in our world today. We must be discerning and wise when we look at the world. We must be able to sort through rhetoric, noise, and protest when we find our place of belonging. We must be resilient and forgiving in the light of truth and of justice, siding with those whom society has truly forgotten, those on the fringes, those who maybe do not shout the loudest. This is learning to love in the way that our Creator has taught us to. Heart forward, listening and grieving, giving and forgiving as we are able. So the English language is pretty limiting sometimes, and we notice this particularly with the word love. Okay, Lauren is here, so I'm going to tell this. So I'm watching the Netflix reality TV show Love is Blind. Has anybody heard of this? Okay, I'll describe the premise very quickly. So boys on one side in one apartment, girls in another apartment, and they meet in the middle in these like little rooms where they can talk to each other but they can't see each other. And it's a dating show, and the extreme part of this is that they all commit to going into the show preparing to get married. So the idea is that they've kind of had a troubled dating history, or they found it troubling to find a connection with somebody based on like the way that the world's dating apps and things promote like physical attractiveness, like you're very making quick decisions based on physical attraction. So the counterintuitive point of this is that you're making the emotional connection before you make any physical connection. Okay, so it's ridiculous, but it's also amazing. And you can't help but wonder if they are onto something, right? So I say I'm watching because Lauren is here. I'm not embarrassed. I really enjoy talking and observing the love and relationship challenges that these couples experience. And yet we see this blind love span across different cultures, different bodies and finances in the ways that no dating app or website could, right? A loving a person for who they are, not the things that maybe cloud our vision. So, okay, moving from Love is Blind to Plato, which is very easy to do. So our word love, we have one word for love, right? It's a broad definition, and we can say that we love our partner, and we love pizza, and we love our pets, all these kinds of things. But the Greek language, which of course the New Testament was, most of the New Testament was written in, has many different words for love. And you may have heard of the one that is used in the passage today, which is agape. Now, without going into too much detail, there are about 6 or 7 definitions that the ancient Greeks wrote about. Some of these are storge, which is the love that we have for our family. Philautia, which is like self-love or self-compassion. Xenia, which is like hospitality. Philia, which is friendship or companionship. Eros, which is the projection of love onto another person. And agape, which is like our outward love, our outward love, right? Which we use to describe God's love for us, and our call to love others from God. So Paul in the letters in the New Testament often uses this language to describe how God loves us. The theologian Thomas Aquinas talks about agape in a way that I really like, which is, he says it's to will the good from another. So this is particularly helpful when we think about what Jesus may be saying in this passage. When he says to love another, love your enemies as you would yourself. To will the goodness in others, to love in others despite their wrongdoings. So to love each other despite their wrongdoings is not simply to will goodness because it benefits ourselves. It is to find humanity in others. To recognize that there is a fundamental goodness in humanity that needs to be sought when we disagree or when we witness injustice. That is the essence of this teaching from our God who sought that same humanity in becoming Jesus, in humbling God's self to become human, to witness and endure suffering whilst recognizing justice and embodying truth. Thinking about the teaching in this way not only helps us with the way that we see ourselves in the world, but also in the way that we heal and reconcile as a community. How we grow together in our relationships, in the way that we find joy, the way that we kindle love and move closer together in flourishing, We constantly talk about the ways which we are divided, and there has never been such a clear example of seeing the world through our own eyes that we now face in coming back together in person after the pandemic. Or are we in the middle of a pandemic? Are we living with an endemic illness? Do we abandon caution? Do we change the way that we interact for good? See, we are all coming from different places with different perspectives. We live life through our own eyes. But this is a time to be patient, to be kind and compassionate. This is a time to watch our behaviour and react based on the comfort of those that we interact with. Seeking that fundamental goodness in humanity, being loving in this case, like our Creator taught us, looks like being the light of forgiveness in a world of uncertainty, where we tread with grace and humility, where we take kindness and where we discover hope. Hope in truth and justice embraced.